heparin. Both contained the AIDS virus. Again, how do you get that in there? Well, gee whiz, I think you got to be grossly negligent, criminally negligent, to allow that to happen. And yet, the statement on MSNBC by the class action attorney is that the Baxter Corporation got off scot-free. They weren't even slapped. Their wrists were not even slapped. There was no ever criminal or even general investigation as to what happened and how it happened. So this is where we are. These people operate above the law because they're operating, actually I can't fully say that. I have some faith still in the judicial system, which generally speaking is a system of injustice. But you look at Larry Beecraft, for example, who tells us no matter how many times they tell you that vaccines are mandatory, they're actually full of it. They're full of crap because you have got the First Amendment to the Constitution, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, religious freedom included, and you've got equal protection under the law that includes if you have a religious conviction to exempt from vaccination, then that should apply for everyone. So everyone should be given a philosophical exemption, and the Congress shall, that means no ifs, ands, or buts, the Congress shall make no laws that violate the fundamentals of the Constitution, nor shall the executive office, which tells us that fundamentally, if challenged in a federal court, the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, the Federal Declaration of Emergency, these are unconstitutional and they shall not stand. Now, you've had two cases recently. You had the case in Washington State where a federal court justice actually turned the mandatory vaccination, compelling the nurses of the state who brought the litigation, that they freed them from the vaccinations and gave them the power of choice. Likewise, what happened last week is you had New York State and the New York State governor reverse himself, not because of a vaccine shortage. That's what they told us. That was what the spin doctors provided. Absolute lies. The main reason why New York State declared an emergency is because they want to support the federal the effort to go into this Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, number one. And number two is they had a very severe litigation brought against them by Gary Null and Ralph Fusikola from the Health Federation and Dr. Rebo. These folks brought a suit that is very compelling that then exposed New York State government to what I've been talking about and presented in my affidavit, the connection between New York State government and the federal government of the United States as partners for Partnership for New York City, the drug industrialists and the media moguls that are actually giving us this propaganda.
Right. Now, you've produced a lot of evidence to many different places, many different entities. Obviously, you have a lot of information. I've seen some of it. As far as the use of the AIDS virus in these vaccines and some of these other highly poisonous, infectious materials that are being introduced under the guise of something being healthy for human beings. So you have potentially a lot of evidence against these individuals and corporations. Just on a personal note, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but have you become a target of these individuals in any way? I mean, have they tried to shut you up or any of that type of activity? I know that's what happens with whistleblowers that are out there. I know because I'm one, but...
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. That's the number one question. And,
really?
Yeah, that's the number one question I'm always asked. And my stock comment, I mean, I could talk for 10, 15 minutes on giving you a background, but my number one statement is that your question sources from fear. It sources from a lack of faith. And it is that which is the fundamental problem that this whole deception involves, is lack of faith in the Creator.
Right.
I can tell you that at least 6 times in my life, there's no reasonable explanation for me to have survived what happened to me. That without protective angels, without an understanding that we are dealing with a spiritual world. We're dealing, and it's not against flesh and blood with whom we do battle. We have protective angels around us, and I know I'm going to die. I know you're going to die. We're all going to die. The question is, when are we going to die, and what are we going to do between now and then? And, you know, it's really...
Has it in the book.
What's
when
that?
When God has it written in the book, Dr. Len.
You bet.
That's
when
we're
exactly
going to die.
right.
Not when these people say we're going to die. But one of the questions I want to pose to you is, for the listening audience, fear factor is a big thing that they play. That's why they're yelling shortage, to get people to run, to get in line. Now, for people who don't want to take the shot, they're so afraid that forced vaccinations are going to come upon us. What kind of advice would you give for us listeners to resist, or what recourse can we take to not have them force this on us?
Litigation in the federal courts, but serious, like real litigation. You know, I've been dealing with some folks, God love them and bless their souls. They have all the good hearts and good intentions, but they then put together these litigations that are rambling, you know, treaties on, you know, everything from poisonous ingredients in vaccinations to globalist agenda for genocide. And the courts just won't deal with that well. So you look at Ralph Fusicola's filing last week. That's an example of a well-thought-out, well-written complaint. And if we were to fill, number one, the community action and the activism is foremost important that would involve this kind of litigation. We have on fluscam.com, folks listening, if you haven't been to fluscam.com yet, you've got to go there, because, you know, I've spent months and months dealing with what can we enable people with, the knowledge and skills and documents to make it as easy as possible to do exactly what you're talking about. Resist and force the maintenance of religious exemptions and philosophical freedoms from vaccination intoxication. And so we've got community action types of documents. There's there's three different resolutions that you can take to your town councils and to your school committees, your township committees and county councils, to advance a resolution that the exemption shall be maintained for those who seek it. Then there's also examples of the litigations. There are beautiful handouts, PDF files freely downloadable, such as the H1N1 2009 Swine Flu newsletter that is largely my affidavit. There's the affidavit itself, and I've been asked to, and I've complied, sending that document out to people involved in litigations who requested that I send it. So I've had it notarized, I've had copies notarized, and I've sent it off to them. And so there's this kind of documentation and grassroots activism is available immediately. We've done most of the homework. All you have to do, there's a community page there. Rob Potter, who's a colleague of ours, put together. He advanced here locally where I am in Southern California. We went to the school committee. We went to the Parents Teachers Association. We went to the Sheriff's Department. We went to the Health Department. And every one of those, there were letters that were written, and those letters, most of them are up. Right now, all you have to do is fill in the blank and change a couple names, and you've got, the activist supportive material.
How many people do you feel will die from this shot, Dr. Len?
Well, the greatest risk is not dying from the shot. There will be many that die from the shot. If I had to gauge it, I'd probably say about ultimately 5 to 10, maybe 15% of the people who get the shot are going to die ultimately from it. They may take years. They may get these diseases that subsequently evolve into terminal illnesses. But I would say that's not even the biggest threat, because that's a threat that will not fulfill the Population Council's goal to reduce the world's population by 2/3. And we're living in the end times, and we're playing out the book of Revelation. And the Mayan calendar ends in 2012. And there's a lot of